My son-in-law took my late wife's jewelry from our house while I was at my brother's funeral. When I found out 3 days later, I said nothing. 2 weeks after that, I handed him a folder. He thought it was the deed to the cottage. He smiled and said, "I knew you'd come around, old man." Until he opened it and saw what was inside. I was sorting through Eleanor's things when I first noticed the velvet box was missing. She'd kept it on her dresser for 31 years. Her mother's pearls, her grandmother's cameo brooch, the diamond earrings we bought together on our anniversary trip to Quebec City. I'd told myself I moved it. Grief does that. Makes you question your own memory. My name is Robert. I'm 64 years old. I spent 38 years working for the city of Calgary, mostly in infrastructure planning. I'm not a dramatic man. I don't raise my voice. I keep things organized. Files, receipts, records. Eleanor used to tease me about it. She called me the archivist. Said I'd document a grocery list like it was a municipal bylaw. She died in February. Pancreatic cancer. We had 7 months from diagnosis to the end, and I spent every one of them either at her side or handling what needed handling, so she wouldn't have to worry. When she passed, I was 63 and felt 80. My daughter Noelle was with us through most of it. She'd drive up from Red Deer every weekend, sit with her mother, help me with meals. Her husband Cody came when he had to. He was always polite, the way a man is polite when he's calculating something. Even at Eleanor's funeral, he had the look of someone reviewing a spreadsheet in his head. I'd noticed the pattern long before the jewelry. Small things. When we'd clear Eleanor's hospital room, he'd ask what was being done with certain items. When I mentioned the cottage on Sylvan Lake, he mentioned his business. Twice in the same week, he ran a renovation contracting company out of Red Deer, doing well on paper, always short on cash in practice. 3 months before Eleanor passed, he came to me quietly, away from the well. Said the business had a cash flow problem. A big project had stalled. Accounts receivable were backed up. He needed a bridge loan. $25,000. Just for 60 days, he said. He had a signed contract from a developer in Lacombe. Showed me the letterhead. Said he'd have it notarized if I wanted. I wrote the check. Told myself I was doing it for Noelle. He never mentioned it again. At Eleanor's memorial, it was my brother Dennis who spotted Cody near the bedroom. Dennis mentioned it later, casually. Didn't think anything of it. Said Cody had been upstairs for a while. I thanked him and let it go. 3 days later, I came home from settling accounts at the funeral home and opened Eleanor's dresser. The velvet box was gone. I opened every drawer, checked the closet shelf, looked in the bathroom cabinet. I called Noelle. She said she hadn't touched anything. Then she put her hand over the phone and I heard her say Cody's name, something low and quick, and then she came back and said maybe it had been misplaced. I sat down on the edge of the bed. Eleanor's cardigan was still draped over the chair. I kept it there. I wasn't ready to move it. I am not a man who acts on emotion. I'm a man who documents. I called our insurance company the next morning. Listed the jewelry on the home policy. Got the appraised value on record. Then I called Lorne Decker, a lawyer I'd worked with on an easement dispute years ago. He'd been direct with me then. I figured he'd be direct with me now. Lorne, it's Robert. I think someone stole from my home during my wife's funeral. Tell me everything, he said. I did. An hour later, he'd laid out my options. File a police report, pursue civil action, or gather more evidence first. He said the threshold for criminal charges was proof beyond reasonable doubt. He asked if I had any documentation. I have everything, I said. I always have everything. That wasn't completely true. What I had was a gap. I knew the jewelry had been there before the memorial, and I knew it was gone after. What I didn't have was direct evidence pointing to Cody. I had suspicion, timeline, and motive. Lorne said that was a start. He told me not to confront anyone. Not yet. I went through the house systematically that evening. I pulled the exterior camera footage from our doorbell system. I'd installed it 2 years prior after a package went missing from the front step. I checked the garage camera too, an old one I'd rigged up after my snowblower disappeared one winter. I reviewed 3 hours of footage from the day of the memorial. At 2:17 p.m., When most guests had moved to the living room and dining area, Cody walked upstairs alone. He came back down 11 minutes later. His jacket pocket sat differently on the way down than it had on the way up. It wasn't proof, but it was something. I sent the footage to Lorne that night with a timestamp log. 2 weeks later, Noelle called. She said, Cody wanted to talk to me. Said he had a proposal regarding the cottage. He wanted to discuss some kind of arrangement where they'd take over the mortgage payments in exchange for primary use of the property. Said it would help me financially. I said I'd think about it. I spent the night pulling everything together. Bank statements. The check I'd written to Cody. The unsigned agreement he'd emailed me about repayment terms, then never followed through on. The footage. The insurance appraisal I'd filed. A printed timeline starting from the day of the memorial. Then I called my son, Patrick, in Edmonton. I told him everything. There was a long silence. Then he said, How long has this been going on? I said I wasn't sure how deep it went, but I was starting to find out. Patrick asked if I wanted him to drive down. I said not yet. I needed him clear-headed and away from it for now. He asked what I was going to do. I said I was going to deliver a folder. The meeting was Cody's idea. He suggested coffee at their place in Red Deer. I said I'd rather he come to Calgary. Something about home ground. Eleanor would have said I was being stubborn. She would have been right. He arrived on a Saturday morning. Noelle wasn't with him. I noticed that. He came in wearing the same expression he always wore around me. Careful pleasantness, like a man who'd rehearsed his lines. I let him sit at the kitchen table where Eleanor and I had eaten 10,000 breakfasts. I put the folder on the table in front of him. Manila plain, thick. He looked at it the way a man looks at a wrapped gift he's already decided he deserves. Finally coming around about the cottage, he reached for it before I answered. I said nothing, just watched. He opened the folder. I saw the shift happen in real time, the way a face collapses from the inside. First the smile, then the confusion, then the blood leaving his face entirely. Cody, that's a civil claim for theft of personal property. You'll find the itemized list on page 2. Insurance valuation is on page 4. The camera footage is on the USB drive clipped to the back cover. His mouth moved without producing sound for a moment. Those belonged to Eleanor. I kept my voice the same level I'd used in 38 years of planning meetings. I know. They were her mother's pearls. That cameo was her grandmother's. We bought the earrings in Quebec City on our 25th anniversary. She was wearing them in the last photograph I have of her standing up on her own. He pushed back from the table. You can't prove I took anything. The footage put you upstairs for 11 minutes during the memorial. Your jacket profile changes between the time you go up and the time you come down. The jewelry went missing during that window. The insurance claim is filed. Lorne Decker is my attorney. His number's on the cover page. Cody stood. His chair scraped against the kitchen floor. Eleanor would have hated that sound. You're doing this to your own family. You stole from a dead woman's dresser while her friends and family were downstairs saying goodbye to her. He left without taking the folder. I watched his truck pull out of the driveway from the kitchen window. Same view I'd had for 26 years. Kids used to play road hockey out there. Lorne called on Monday. Cody's lawyer had been in touch. They were claiming the jewelry had been given as a gift to Noella and that Cody was retrieving it on her behalf. It was a weak position. There was no documentation, no prior mention, and nothing in Eleanor's handwriting or on record suggesting it. But it would be Cody's word against mine, plus a timestamp on a doorbell camera. Then Lorne told me the harder part. Noelle was going along with it. I sat with that for a long time after I hung up. Poured a cup of coffee I didn't drink. Walked to the window. A neighbor was salting his front walk. February in Calgary. Normal things happening outside. I thought about Noelle at 8 years old, sitting next to Eleanor in the kitchen, learning how to make her grandmother's shortbread. I thought about her at the hospital, holding Eleanor's hand while I stepped out to speak with the palliative care team. I thought about her face at the memorial. My phone rang. It was her. Dad, I think you're making this much bigger than it needs to be. He stole your mother's jewelry, Noel. That's not what happened. There was a long pause. He said she had offered it to us before she passed. That she told him. Did she tell you? She was sick, Dad. She said a lot of things. Did she tell you? Another pause. No. Then she went quiet. In the background I heard Cody's voice, low and directing. I'm not going to fight you on this, she said finally. But if you push this, it's going to tear everything apart. It's already torn, I said. We just haven't looked at it yet. She hung up. I called Patrick again that night. He drove down. We sat at the kitchen table. He'd brought takeout from the Vietnamese place on Center Street that Eleanor had liked. We ate without talking much. Patrick looked at the folder. He looked at me. You know this gets worse before it gets better, he said. I know. Has Noelle said anything else? Not to me. She's listening to him. Patrick set down his fork. He took his time choosing his words. He's been at this longer than we know, hasn't he? I opened my laptop and showed him the spreadsheet I'd put together. Every request, every amount, every date. The 25,000. A smaller amount I'd given Noelle 2 years ago for car repairs that Cody had texted me about directly. A check I'd written to their joint account for moving costs when they'd bought the house in Red Deer. 7,300 more. I hadn't added it up before. It sat differently when it was a number. Patrick said, What are you going to do about all of this? I'm going to file, I said. And I'm going to find out if this happened to anyone else. It didn't take long. 3 days after Lorne sent the formal civil claim, I got a call from a man named Hugh, retired teacher from Ponoka. Said he'd been Cody's father-in-law before Cody, and that he'd been looking for a reason to talk to someone for 2 years. His daughter had been Cody's first wife, married for 4 years in their late 20s. The pattern was the same, small loans that accumulated, a charm that worked on older people especially. Then pressure, then, near the end, Cody had signed Hugh's name on a credit application using a form he'd obtained through the daughter. Hugh had caught it, confronted him. Cody had denied it. His daughter defended him. They'd divorced shortly after, but Hugh had never filed charges. I sat forward. Why not? Because my daughter asked me not to. She said it would ruin her life. And I believed her. It was quiet for a moment. I was wrong to listen to her. Or maybe I wasn't wrong. Maybe I just couldn't see far enough ahead. She's fine now. Remarried. But I should have said something. Will you say something now? He said yes. I called Lorne immediately. Pattern of behavior. Prior victim with documentation. Credit application forgery. Lorne was already writing before I finished the sentence. 2 weeks before the court date, Noelle called again. It was late. I could hear from her voice that she'd been crying. I found the jewelry, she said. Where? In a box in his truck. He said he was going to have them cleaned. Resized for me. She stopped. I've been lying for him, Dad. I've been lying for him, and I knew it, and I kept going. I set the folder I'd been holding down on the desk. I know. I don't know when I stopped seeing it. I think I didn't want to see it. Does that make sense? Yes, it does. A long silence. It told me something about Mom. Before she died. He said she'd asked him to help manage some of her accounts because she didn't want to worry you while you were dealing with everything. That she'd sent him some money directly. I believed him. She was sick, and she wanted to take care of things, and it felt like something she would do. I kept my voice steady. How much? 12,000. He showed me a wire transfer. Her name on it. I walked to my desk and opened the filing cabinet where I kept Eleanor's financial records going back to 2019. Found the account summaries from her personal checking account, the one she'd managed separately for household things. 12,000. October 2022. Wire transfer. To a numbered company I didn't recognize. Lorne had that number traced inside 48 hours. Cody's company. a secondary one incorporated in Alberta that he'd never mentioned to anyone in the family. Eleanor had sent that money believing she was helping our daughter. Cody had told her Noelle needed emergency dental surgery and was too proud to ask us directly. He'd said to wire it quietly. She was on palliative care by then, exhausted and afraid, trying to tie up loose ends while she still could. She died believing she'd helped her daughter. She hadn't. She'd helped him buy a truck. I stood in the kitchen for a long time after I read the wire transfer confirmation. The sun was going down. The cardigan was still on the chair. I'd kept it there for months. I finally put it away that night, folded it carefully and put it in the box with Eleanor's other things. Not because I was ready, because she deserved better than to be near any of this. The civil proceeding was scheduled for a Tuesday morning at the Court of Queen's Bench in Calgary. I arrived early. Lorne met me in the atrium going over the last details. Noelle was not expected. We hadn't spoken since her call about the jewelry. I didn't know where she stood. She was sitting in the second row when I walked into the courtroom. She looked at me once. I nodded. That was enough. Hugh drove down from Ponica. 68 years old, retired, quiet man in a good coat. He shook my hand in the hallway and said he was sorry he'd waited this long. I said so was I, but we were here now. Lorne presented methodically the camera footage, the insurance documentation, the financial timeline, Hugh's testimony about the credit application, the wire transfer from Eleanor's account, Cody's secondary numbered company. Cody's lawyer argued that everything had been consensual, that Eleanor had chosen to help, that the jewelry had been offered as a gift, that Hugh was a bitter ex-father-in-law pursuing a grudge. Then Noelle stood up. She hadn't been listed as a witness. Cody's lawyer objected. Lorne noted she had standing as an immediate family member with direct knowledge. The judge allowed it. She testified for 11 minutes. She said she had never been ill in October 2022. She said her mother had never mentioned sending money. She said she had found the jewelry in her husband's truck. She said she had spent 6 months telling herself she didn't know what she knew. When she was done, Cody stood at the defense table. His lawyer put a hand on his arm. He sat back down. The judge ruled in my favor on all counts: return of property or full appraised value, repayment of the amounts borrowed and not returned, damages for the fraudulent wire transfer taken from Eleanor's account. Cody sat very still while the judgment was read. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Noelle. I didn't feel what I expected to feel. There was no satisfaction exactly, more like a window being opened in a room that had been closed too long. Outside the courthouse, Noelle stood by the steps. She had her coat pulled tight. February still. We stood there in the cold air of downtown Calgary without saying anything for a moment. Then she said, "I'm sorry, Dad." I put my arm around her. We stood there like that for a while. Not talking, just standing. Patrick was waiting by my car. He'd driven down again. Hadn't missed a day of the proceeding. He opened the passenger door for me without saying anything. Sometimes that's what family does. 3 months later, Cody had retained a new lawyer and filed an appeal. His company had folded. He'd moved out of the Red Deer house. Noelle was staying in it, at least until she figured things out. She drove down to Calgary on Sundays sometimes, sat at the kitchen table. I made coffee. We talked about practical things mostly. Her work, Patrick's kids, what to do with the cottage in summer. Once, she asked if I thought her mother would forgive her. I thought about that for a moment. I thought about Eleanor's patience, the way she'd always said that most people were trying their best, even when they weren't quite managing it. "I think she already has," I said. Noelle looked at the window. The cardigan was gone from the chair. The velvet box was back on the dresser. The jewelry was all there. The pearls, the cameo, the earrings from Quebec City. I'd had a locksmith change every lock in the house the week after the judgment. Small, practical thing. Eleanor would have approved. The appeal dragged on into spring. Lorne said it would likely fail. The evidence was too clear. I'd spent 38 years in municipal planning, and the one thing that job teaches you is that documentation outlasts everything. Intentions, excuses, charm. All of it fades. Paper doesn't. I started going to the Sylvan Lake cottage again. Patrick came out with the kids on a long weekend in May. We opened the windows, aired out the rooms, repaired the dock. It needed paint. I bought supplies and we worked on it together, his boys handing me boards while he and I talked about nothing important. Standing on that dock at the end of the day, watching the light go flat on the water, Patrick said, "Do you think you'd do it differently if you could go back?" I considered it honestly. I'd have asked more questions sooner, I said. I'd have trusted what I noticed instead of explaining it away. But you'd still file. Yes, I'd still file. He nodded. The water was still. Eleanor had always loved evenings out here. Some things you can't fix. Some things you can't only make sure don't happen to the next person. Hugh knew that. He'd spent 2 years carrying it before he finally picked up the phone. I thought about the folder sitting on Cody's lap at my kitchen table. The way the smile had drained out of his face when he saw what was inside. Not money. Not a deed. A record of everything. 38 years as an archivist. Eleanor teased me about it until the end. Turned out it mattered. The folder sat on Cody's lap for maybe 3 seconds before his face changed. That's all it took. 3 seconds for 31 years of Eleanor's patience, her mother's pearls, her grandmother's cameo, to become something he could not explain away. I've thought about that moment a lot since then. Not with satisfaction exactly, more like recognition. What I understood, sitting across from him at my own kitchen table, was that people like Cody don't operate in the dark. They operate in the space you leave them. Every time I explained away a warning sign, every time I wrote a check without asking harder questions, every time I told myself it was for Noel, I was leaving space. I'm not saying that makes what he did my fault. It doesn't. But I was 63 years old, and I should have known better than to let charm substitute for character. Eleanor knew. She never said it directly, but she'd go quiet in a particular way when Cody was around. I used to think she was just tired. She was sick and tired. She had every right to be. Now, I think she was watching, the way she always watched, and waiting to see what I'd do. She trusted me to handle things. I just took too long to start. What finally moved me wasn't anger. It was her signature on that wire transfer. $12,000 sent from her personal account 4 months before she died to a numbered company Cody had hidden inside a business registration. She sent it thinking she was helping our daughter through something painful. She carried that to the end. He let her. That's not a mistake or a lapse in judgment. That's a choice made deliberately against a woman who is running out of time to find out the truth. There's no word for that except wrong. What I learned from all of it is something I wish I could teach without having lived it. It starts with knowing your own records, not because you distrust people, but because clarity is a form of respect for yourself and for the people who depend on you. I spent 38 years documenting municipal infrastructure because the city needed accurate information to function. My own household deserved the same standard. That discipline, that habit of keeping things straight and verifiable, is what made it possible to act when acting mattered. But documentation alone doesn't move you. Hugh had documentation. He sat on it for 2 years because his daughter asked him to, and he loved her more than he trusted his own judgment in that moment. I understand that completely. The hardest part of this entire thing wasn't filing the claim or sitting through the proceeding. It was watching Noelle make her way back to the truth on her own timeline, knowing I couldn't hurry it without losing her. Staying the course when the people you love are caught in the middle. That takes something that isn't quite courage and isn't quite patience. It's closer to steadiness, a decision you make quietly and keep making every day until it's done. Noelle drives down on Sundays now. We drink coffee and talk about ordinary things. The cottage needs a new roof section. Patrick's youngest is starting school in September. The appeal is still pending and probably won't go anywhere. Life continues at its own pace regardless of what any judge decides. I keep Eleanor's jewelry in the velvet box on the dresser where it always was. Some mornings I look at it and think about how much she would have had to say about all of this, and how she would have said it gently, and how she would have been right.